landscape. Okay, he's Mr. Vikas Phadke. He's an investor relations head from Arthayan.com. Arthayan is a company based in Pune, which does these investments in startups. Okay, they have connections to family businesses, high net worth individuals, CSRs, NGOs, and many such agencies. And he was also former CF, was Chief Financial Officer in Muthoot Finance. Okay, so he has got a greater understanding of this game of investment. So please prepare your questions, all the participants. In meanwhile, so now we are breaking for lunch. We'll be joining at 2 o'clock. Bye.
Will actually.
So yeah, I think participants can continue introducing to the speaker, so that he'll have some pointers how we can orient his talk. See, if everybody is done introducing yourself, 30 seconds or so.
No, not yet, sir.
Go ahead.
Sir, this is Dr. G. Janardhan Raju.
Hello, sir.
Sir, very good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Sir, this is Dr. G. Janardhan Raju, sir, working as a Dean School of Engineering and a Professor of Mechanical Engineering, Nalla Narasimha Reddy Education Society's group of institutions, Hyderabad, sir.
Thank you.
Initially, actually, I have attended one 2 weeks program at Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India, Ahmedabad, somewhere in 2018. Then after attending that program, I gained, in fact, interest and confidence, so that I have found that a very important topic, even so that I can even give back to the students. Then afterwards, immediately after that program, I have organized one entrepreneurship awareness camp, which is under DST NIMAT scheme, by inviting very good people from DIC, even MSME, or even other industries, persons, even one from chief engineer, the chief manager from bank.
Okay.
Then I have attended 2 weeks, 2 days programs at MLR at Hyderabad on pre-incubation and incubation management.
Okay.
Then recently, last semester, I have opted one NPTEL course. I have done it on entrepreneurship. And with this interest, in fact, I have even taught one. I opted one subject as elective subject for the students. In the process, because as this also a part, I am really very happy to be a part of this program, because as a very eminent persons are here to share their views, and when we involve more and more activities, network will be developed. We'll get more number of ideas, confidence, and everything will be developed. So that I really feel very happy to be a part of this. This just introduction about me. I am planning to organize one more update program in the future, sir. That's what.
Definitely. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Dr. Deepthi Jordana.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm professor in electronics. Right now, I'm working as a convener for entrepreneurship development cell in SRIT College, Anantapur.
Okay.
We are recognized as a host institute business incubator by MSME. So in this process, in this process, I'm attending this FDP so that I can gain more knowledge on how to manage with these incubation centers, on what basis these are all done, and what steps we are supposed to take, and what we have to look into future so that it gets sustained and all.
Yes.
It's really working out very well for us, and hoping the same in future days also. Nice to have you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, sir.
Hello.
Sir, good morning. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
Sir, this is Dr. Kovan Ramaya.
Good afternoon.
From Kuppam Engineering College, Kuppam.
Okay.
Working as a professor and R&D director.
Okay.
And I involved in so many activities in New Janna EDC, DST funds. I got DST fund of 3 crores.
Okay, that's nice.
And FDP programs I regularly used to conduct. and I am closely associated with Atal Incubation Center. And I got three to four startups already started. And last session, I think today 3:30, 4:30, Mr. Shukran requested me, and today I am sharing all my success stories, my difficulties. This is my story.
Sure,
Yes.
sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else would like to share something? Otherwise, I will commence. Okay. Let me formally welcome the team from Artaya. Mr. Vikas Patte and his associate Kapil is there, Malhar. They know whole gang is here. So nice. Happy welcome to all of you. Hope the rains have subsided.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thane and Mumbai. We're comfortable now. So I'll give you a small introduction about the speaker, sorry. Kapil, okay, no problem. I will not require. Okay, I'll give you a little introduction about Vikas Patte. Currently, he is a consultant and the virtual CFO of this company called Arthayan. Arthayan is an ecosystem enabler, I would say, where they are empowering people by associating incubation centers to investors through programs like accelerator programs or interface programs and many such tailor-made programs for each incubation center. That's how we have come in touch with them. So he's the Mr. Vikas Patte is leading the team in different ways. So basically, he started his journey like long back, almost 3 decades of experience. But last 3-4 assignments, I would tell, he was a chief financial officer of Multi Commodity Exchange of India. Then he went on to become chief financial officer for Muthoot Housing Financial Corporation Limited, where they were doing affordable housing, financing affordable housing. So he was leading that team. Then later he became CFO, come vice president for again Multi Commodity Exchange of India, and where the employee strength is around 350 and total turnover is around 250 crores plus. So he has done, he led the teams with finance, accounts, risk management, audit compliances, and allied subjects. Then later, I think currently he's currently with Arthayan as a consultant and virtual CFO. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he's he's guiding the company, in investment landscape. So who are all the investors? What kind of investment? And where we can invest? So this is what he's mapping investments to the startups. So that's what his expertise is. So with that note, I would welcome Mr. Vikas Patte. Before commencing, sir, before I give the mic to you, some pointers I would like to give to you so that you can orient your talk.
Sure, sir.
One thing is most of the people participants are academicians. Okay. And some of them are from engineering colleges, some of them are from government degree colleges. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
not
sir.
necessarily from tech background. Some of them are basic sciences. Okay. And some of them are they're from, this is the first time the exposure they have, some of them.
Sure, sir.
Okay. And even some of them are social workers here. So they would like to understand more of this innovation and landscape. So I think if you can orient your talk, so that it will be very relevant to this participants.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Definitely.
Okay. So over to you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Shiva, about introducing myself. And I'm glad that I'm a part of your program as entrepreneur development program sort of thing. I have actually seen and heard the voices of all your participants, and I welcome them for this sort of a presentation. The topic which was handed over to us in respect of presenting this was investment landscape and types of investments. One would also look into as to what is a form of an investment. Investment is nothing but an amount which is given to a person or a firm or a corporate or a corporation for meeting its own obligations, for its expansion programs, for its growth, for its upliftment, and for moving it into from one cycle to another cycle. Now, if you see actually as far as investment landscape is concerned, there are various types of investments which are there in India. The investments normally which has come in India has come in from actually Europe and all those countries as far as equity sale is concerned, debt is concerned, hybrid instruments are concerned. So there are different ways of raising funds in respect of all these investments. So let us move ahead as far as the first one is concerned, which is as far as the equity finance or the equity sale is concerned. As we have shared in the slide, there are three different ways as far as raising the funds are concerned. One of them is the first one is the equity sale. When we are talking about equity sale is nothing but an equity finance. Now, what is an equity finance actually? Equity finance is nothing but selling a portion of the company actually to an outsider in terms of equity actually. So this actually equity has nothing but it entitles the holder for the participation of profits and the value which is created by the company actually. Equity shares are normally issued to to people who are also termed as equity holders. What are the chief characteristics of an equity holder actually, or the people who are having these sort of an equity shares or equity holders? Equity holders are more inclined towards high risk, high reward projects, which would lead to a higher returns actually. Their approach actually is completely different in respect of contribution of the money. Their approach is high risk, high rewards. This sort of an approach is normally held by the equity investor sort of thing. When we are talking about startups, as far as raising the equity funds are concerned, equity is one of the major elements which the startups will have to raise in their lifespan one or the other way. It may come in the form of an initial equity, which is being put in by the promoter itself. It may come in the form of an employee stock options or in the form of a share, which is given to its own employees. It may come in the form of a sharing his equity with an outsider who's ready to invest in this company. So equity sale or equity shares is one of the forms which is normally happening in the life cycle of a startup, right from its incorporation to its reaching a particular level. Once a particular level is reached, once he attains a particular sustainability as far as his business is concerned, he has a lot of investors with him, he goes in for an IPO. In fact, an IPO is also nothing but a raising of an equity share, wherein you have to list the shares on the stock exchange and it is readily available as far as marketable trade is concerned. So this is in the form of an equity share is concerned. Simultaneously, if we go to a debt finance is nothing but a finance or a loan, and it refers to raising of a capital in the form of a loan, which is repayable in future and also paying interest to the debt holder on a regular basis. Now, what is actually meant by a debt finance or a debt finance? Debt finance is basically, as described to you, as a loan or an issue or a bond to raise its own capital. Now, when you choose to raise funds through debt finance, there are different choices which are to be made, as there are numerous alternatives for the debt financing. Debt financing could be in the form of a bank loan, debt financing could be in the form of a debentures, debt finance could be in the form of a preference shares, debt finance could be in the form of loans. So all these are a part of a debt finance. Now, what are the main characteristics as far as debt finance is concerned? The main characteristics of this debt finance is a debt finance carries an interest amount, while the debt holders in normal circumstances, have a conservative approach towards lending its own money. Now, if we take a traditional example of a debt finance, you can call it in the form of a money lender lending his own money for an interest amount which he gets from the person to whom it's lent. So debt finance is actually a term which has been come across through traditional money lenders by lending. It's a form of a loan which is repayable at a particular level, at a particular time interval. And till the time interval happens, an interest amount is charged in respect of the debt finance. The third one, which is there, is in the form of a hybrid instruments. Now, hybrid instruments are a gel of both these debt as well as equity. These are two different sort of an instruments, debt and equity combined together in the form of a hybrid instrument. They have all the characteristics of a debt finance as well as the characteristics of an equity finance. Characteristics of an equity finance is basically happening after a particular term limit or after a particular time period, actually. So hybrid instruments are normally all the convertibles. Basically, you have convertible debentures, you have convertible preference shares, you have convertible bonds, you have convertible securities. So in this, actually, the main characteristics of a hybrid instrument is for a term period, it is in the form of a debt, maybe around 2 years or 3 years. And after 3 years, the conversion takes place in respect of an equity. Now, the conversion takes place at that point of time once the bond holder or the debt holder and the debt basically matures and it turns up into an equity. Now, till the time it is in the form of a debt, these instruments give you an interest. Once it moves into an equity, it gives you a growth, it gives you a value for your shares, and as well as it gives you an amount of dividend, whatever has been declared by the company. So these are basically three ways of raising funds as far as companies are concerned. These are normal ways in which you will find all the instruments which are raised, new instruments which do come into account, new instruments which do come and which will come henceforth also. These are basically categorized into these three sort of setups, which are equity sale, debt finance, as well as hybrid instruments. Some of them will be hybrid, some of them will be debt finance, and some of them will be equity sales. Now, when we are speaking about investments, why does that investment decisions are absolutely important for an organization's success? All investment decisions which normally happen, they are absolutely crucial at a particular crucial stage. Let us take an example of a startup starting and registering itself with an incubation center. Now, when a startup starts up his own business, the main thing, whatever he puts in, is in the form of his own money. He contributes his own money, he gets it from his family, he gets it from his friends and all that. And this is how he has a startup. He ties up with an incubator, the incubator funds him to a particular limit and to a particular extent. Now, after this sort of a thing is concerned, after this investment has been brought in by the startup as well as the incubator, he attains a particular level. Now, at this particular level, once he attains, he feels that yes, his company should grow up. And this is where the investment decision is absolutely of a very important thing as far as every startup is concerned. It is not only important to raise the capital, but also a startup should understand what expectations does the investor have from the company once he decides to raise an investment. The most important thing as far as the startup before raising an investment is he should himself be in a position to decide as to how much investment he has to raise, how much money he has to bring in to reach to a second level or a third level as far as his startup is concerned. What part of equity is he able to share with the investor? Should he raise up in the form of an equity share, or should he raise up in the form of a debt, or should he raise up in the form of a hybrid instrument? Because in normal circumstances, what happens, every startup or every organization has its different characteristics. Every startup is in a sort of a different sector. If I take an example of an agri-tech sector, wherein AIC SKU is having its own startups, mostly in the agri-tech sector. If we take up that example, an agri-tech sector, a startup, he does an innovation, he does a product in respect of which either it would be in the form of a social impact responsibility or manufacturing of an instrument which is helping into the agricultural sector. Now he has to move into a second level. But before moving into a second level, he has to take a decision as to whether moving into a second level whatever investment he is going to bring, whether these investments should be in the form of an equity, whether he is in a position to give up his share of equity to an outside investor. He has to look out for an investor who is also in a position to help him in his aims or in his goals or in his vision, which he has. And these decisions are absolutely important in respect of every startup company or every company. We are talking about more about startups, so let us concentrate on startups, but it is also applicable to a corporate sector or corporation or a company which has to raise its investments in the form of an equity, which has to go to the market for raising IPOs, which has to raise it in the form of a debt, which has to raise it in the form of debentures. So all these investment decisions are absolutely important. And one more factor which is most likely in respect of investment decisions are, how are you going to take a right investment decision? Whether you are going to go in the form of an equity, whether you are going to go in the form of a bond, you are going to go in the form of a hybrid instrument. The most apt thing as far as taking in an investment decision is, first chart down your vision, chart down your growth pattern, chart down your plan. Based on the plan, have it, discuss with your team, discuss it with your people as to where you want to move in the span of 1 year, where you want to move in the span of 2 years, where you want to move in the span of 3 years. What is your right approach? What is your vision? And based on your vision, based on the chart, based on the planning which you're doing, you can take an absolute right decision whether you want to move into an equity sector, or you want to have a debt funding, or you want to have a hybrid sort of a funding. So investment decisions are absolutely very important for every successful business. And any successful business, to meet its own obligations, to meet its own criteria, to meet its own visions, the entrepreneur or the promoter should be in a position to think beyond what he is thinking now. Think beyond what he is thinking about the investor. Put yourself into the place of an investor and start thinking about what is expected or what the investor is expecting from him, and basically sit on with a bargaining power with him. But prior to that, build up your own business, build up your empire to such a level that you can command your own position. So this is one of the most important decisions as far as investment is concerned. We would like to move on to the next one, actually. Now, what are the actual pros and cons of the vanilla products of debt and equity? We were talking about debt segment, we were talking about equity segment, all those segments, we were talking about hybrid segments. There are some advantages, there are some disadvantages in respect of each and every segment. So one, as I had said earlier, before taking an investment decision, a promoter, an entrepreneur, a startup company, or a person who wants to raise investments has to think about these pros and cons at every point of time, at every step, whenever he is moving ahead in terms of raising of these investments. The basic pros or the advantages of the pros and cons of a debt segment is, a person who decides, or a company decides, a corporation decides to take a debt, it does not have to part away with equity. Equity is nothing but a right of ownership in the business. It is a right which you're giving to an outsider to share your own business. So once you go in for a debt, once you decide for a debt, the main advantage of going in for a debt is the business does not have to part away with any of the ownership right. The business only has to part away with the amount or with the fund it has taken in the form of a loan at a particular time interval. It has to be regular in paying of the dividend. In this case, as far as another most important advantage is, the financier has no control over the internal workings of the country, internal workings of the company. He has no decision-making power in respect to the internal workings of the company. So the promoter can take his own decisions. The promoter can work accordingly. The promoter has least amount of interference in respect of a debt loan. These debt loans are generally a faster way of raising finance in case of startups to start its own operations on time, because as far as equity is concerned, you have to value your shares. Your valuation has to be agreed by the investor. The investor has to come out in respect of this valuation, and then you get these sort of a finance. As far as debt is concerned, it's an easier way of raising finance to start your own operations. The cons of it is a fixed interest at a stipulated period of time, either on a every monthly basis or a quarterly basis or a 6 monthly basis, whenever you have decided to pay in the form of an interest. For this, one of the major responsibilities of a startup is to fix up the cash flow in such a way that you are in a position to pay this interest amount to the loan provider who has provided you loan, and there is no default in this payment. So even if he agrees as far as the debt segment is concerned, fixed amount of interest, arranging a cash flow for this amount of interest to be paid either on a quarterly, monthly, or as per the agreed terms is very important for the debt segment. The loan amount thus can be repaid over a period or a stipulated period of time. And this actually loan or a debt may not be a right choice for early stage startups. Now, when I say that, why it cannot be a right choice for an early stage startup? The early stage startup, what do you mean by an early stage startup? The early stage startup is nothing but a startup which has just started its business, which is into a pre-seed funding, which is into a seed funding, which has limited amount of cash on his hand. And with that cash, he has to manage his own business. He has to bring up the company. He has to put it into a certain level and then start up. So this is the most important thing. And if you agree in that particular stage for a fixed interest amount to be paid on an every month basis or every quarter basis in respect of a debt, then definitely that is an amount which you have to have in your cash flow, in your inflow statement at every point of time. You have to keep that in your mind that you have to pay this amount. And this amount will not be you will not be in a position to use that for your operational expenses. So in normal circumstances for early stage startups, debt funding is not an ideal way. But when this debt funding will be an ideal way for a startup? This debt funding would be an ideal way once you have a seed funding and once you reach after a second level after a seed funding. After a seed funding, maybe in the level 1 or a mezzanine financing. Mezzanine financing, which comes after seed funding. This mezzanine financing has a different scope of financing, which is a hybrid equipment, which is an equity share as a debt segment, as well as a debt segment into that. So this is the right time as far as mezzanine financing, wherein a startup can go into a debt financing. So we have understood about the pros and cons of the debt financing. We could now definitely move ahead as far as the equity financing is concerned. As we rightly said earlier, that equity financing is nothing but it translates selling off a portion of a company to an equity holder or a person who is getting an ownership in respect of your company. Now, what are the advantages of an equity share or an equity? You don't have a fixed repayment required. There is no repayment in respect of an equity. You don't have to pay back that amount. You don't have to pay that amount, or there is no fixed amount of interest paid to be paid to an equity shareholder. In respect of a venture fails, there is no need to repay the investors. Of course, this is a very risky approach as far as if the venture fails, there is no need to repay the investors, because once I start an organization, once I start a startup, this sort of a mindset as far as failure of that venture should not happen as far as any startup is concerned. Every startup should work up in such a way that it is in a position to meet its goals, it is in a position to repay its investors, whether it is in the form of an equity investor or debt investors or hybrid sort of investors or funds, whichever he takes. This equity funding may take place even in ventures which are in the form of an ideation stage, early stage, pre-seed stage, or at any form of stage, or at any form of levels as far as equity, levels of startups are concerned. Now, what are the cons in respect to that? The cons or the disadvantages are we are selling our own company. The investors are becoming our partners or our side owners as far as the company is concerned. In this case, what happens when I am selling my equity? When I'm selling my equity, there is an equity dilution. What do you mean by an equity dilution? Equity dilution is I have 100 equity shares in my hand. Today, if I take around 20 rupees from an equity investor, in exchange of this 20 rupees, I give him 20% holding. So when I give him 20% holding, my equity holding reduces from 100% to 80%. And his holding comes at a 20% value. And being an equity shareholder, he is the owner, part owner, and a partner. Now, in this form of an equity share, equity shareholders can also have a right to check up the ownership status, to move into internal workings of the company, to have an indirect control over the promoters. All these things are part and parcel of the disadvantages factor of an equity. Still, then why people go ahead for an equity? If equity shares or equity investments does have a lot of disadvantage, still why many people go in for an equity? The main reason why many people go in for an equity is basically for getting a valuation, for moving up into a further level, for attracting more investors, because ideally in the first investor, you might have only 20% equity. Once your company grows, your valuation happens as far as your equity is concerned. Your 100 rupee value equity could be 1,000 rupees. Your 1,000 rupee equity value could be 10,000 rupees. So further, when you're funding or when you're seeking more investors, you give a lesser amount of equity at every point of time as your company progresses. So that is one of the basic reasons that equity shareholders are preferred at every startup. Also, the investor also feels more comfortable once he has an equity into it, because he gets a part ownership as far as the company is concerned. He gets to know about the company. He also helps the startups in respect of his business. He guides the startup. So at most of the times, there are investors who prefer in the form of an equity. Apart from this, as we had earlier said, we have hybrid instruments, which are nothing but a combination of a debt segment as well as an equity segment. This combination of a debt segment and equity segment are in sort of a various forms. As we had earlier said in our earlier slides, what is actually a hybrid instrument? Now, hybrid instruments are basically instruments which are having a debt as well as a equity segment into that. Let us take up the first one as far as debt segment preference shares is concerned. Now, these are various types of shares. As we were discussing about equity financing earlier, we have equity shares, we have preference shares. In the preference shares, we have a cumulative preference shares, we have non-cumulative preference shares, we have redeemable preference shares, we have irredeemable preference shares. So these are different varieties of shares or preference shares which are normally there. Preference shares are neither a debt nor an equity. It's a sort of a hybrid format of an instrument. A major advantage of it is that in this sort of an equity or a preference share, you don't have a fixed obligation to pay a dividend. Dividend is payable only if there is a sufficient amount of profits. Also, preference shareholders do not have a say in the company. They do not have an ownership right in the company. They do not have a participation in the regular day-to-day affairs of the company. These are the basic advantages of having a preference shares. Now, what are the disadvantages? Dividend is absolutely payable in case of the company makes a profit. So every time a company makes a profit, it has to pay to its preference shares. The rate of dividend is generally higher than the interest to account for the additional risk which the preference shareholder has taken. Because in most of the circumstances, what happens now, there is a difference in respect of a debt segment and a hybrid segment of preference shares. In a debt segment, you have to pay a fixed amount of interest which you have agreed. As far as preference shares is concerned, if your company doesn't go into profit or if it doesn't make a profit, the dividend paying concept of a preference share is not applicable to the company. The dividend paying concept is applicable once it makes a profit. So the amount of dividend which is payable is normally higher than the interest rate to account for the additional risk which the preference share investor takes in investing the company. This dividend which is paid to the preference shareholder is paid out of the profits and tax paid profits, and thus it is not allowed as a deduction in the income tax. Thus, preference shares are not tax efficient structure in comparison to any other tax efficient structure. So this is the basic pros and the cons as far as the preference shares are concerned. In this, we also have a type of preference shares, which I said, which are convertible preference shares. What do you mean by convertible preference shares? Convertible preference shares are shares which are convertible. These are convertible into equity shares at a future date. These instruments, they do have the rights of a preference shareholders with an option to convert it into equity shares at a future date. This is absolutely an attractive proposition for investors because it gives liquidity in the form of dividends in the early phases, as well as in the growth prospects on conversion. Now, when I mean to say it is an advantage to the investors, what do I mean by this? I mean about it that once when it is in the form of an preference, the return is in the form of a dividend, which is given to a preference shareholder. Once it turns into an equity, you have absolute growth prospects as far as the conversion are concerned. Once a company grows, getting the equity shares in a growing company, getting a valuation for its own equity shares is absolutely a reward for a convertible preference share investor. So definitely this is an attractive proposition for investors to invest into startups or into an early stage companies, and then moving on from one level to another level. This is also to a certain extent not suitable for early stage investors. Now, when I say not suitable for an early stage investors who are at an ideation stage or an MVP stage, why it is not suitable for an early stage startup? It is not suitable for an early stage startup because you have a lot of complications in respect of this convertible preference shares in the terms of documentations, in terms of valuing as far as the equity is concerned, in terms of preparing a plan out when it is going to be converted. Also, whatever your plans are, also whatever your visions are, you are sitting with the preference shareholder, discussing with him and informing him. All these things also come at the right early stage wherein you're sharing your own information to that. Now, upon conversion of these investors, they do have the same rights as the equity holders. So a preference shareholder initially is in the form of a debt holder. Later on, it comes into a form of an equity holder once the shares are converted. Once the shares are converted, these preference shareholders are no longer preference shares. They convert it themselves into an equity share. All the benefits, all the advantages of equity shares are applicable to them in the form of a dividend, in the form of valuation, in the form of a growth. All these are applicable to these convertible preference shares. Subsequently, there is one important note sort of thing. We move on to the next slide, which is called as an iSafe notes. When I'm talking about iSafe note,
is it okay if I interfere and ask some question, or should I wait?
Definitely, sir. Definitely. We can definitely do that. We can definitely do that.
Okay. Can you give me some clarity about what kind of startups or entities can go for debt, or what kind of legal entities can go for this equity, or what category of industry can do that? In as an industry, it's basically startup.
See, when I'm talking, when I'm talking about startup, or when I'm talking about a startup is what is a startup actually? Startup comes into a different sector. It could be a social impact sector. It could be an industry sector. It could be a machinery sector. It could be a capital intensive sector. It could be a manpower intensive sector. Any sort of a intensive sector it could form part of. Now, when I'm talking about going in for an equity shareholder or an equity funding, then definitely if it is a capital intensive, I should prefer an equity shareholder as far as my startup is concerned. If it is not a capital intensive sector, if I don't want to share my own ownership rights to him at this point of time, then definitely go in for debt equity or a debt fund sort of thing. But as far as the early startup is concerned, it is always better if I'm going in for a capital intensive sector to go into a hybrid form wherein I have a debt form, I have an equity form. The investor is also preferably comfortable in going in for a hybrid form because initially his money is safe once it is into a debt form. Later on, as the company grows up, he moves into an equity form. So actually going in for an equity sector, going in for a bond sector, or going in for a hybrid sector depends on the plan of every startup, its growth strategy, it's moving into a next level. its own vision, its own plans as far as when it is to be moved.
Now, a follow-up question, quick follow-up question.
Yes.
See, Startup India, Gazette of India, in the Gazette of India, under Startup India policy, they have got a definition, and we clearly says that what can be a startup, what cannot be a startup, or who can be startup, who cannot be startup.
Yeah.
Barring from being a proprietary, rest are all can be startups. Means in terms of legal entities.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Like firms or partnerships and private limited companies. These are the three things.
Yes, sir.
Now, is there any, like, among these three, like firms, partnership firms, and private limited company, this kind of legality can also impact the choice of debt or equity?
Definitely, it can impact the choice of debt or equity, because if it is a partnership company or it's a private limited company, okay. Now, a startup, once it starts either starts with a sole proprietorship company or it starts up with a partnership company. It doesn't start up immediately with a private limited company. As it moves on or as it grows from a pre-seed to a seed stage, it desires itself to move into a private limited company. Now, in a private limited company, definitely it would be in the form of an equity shares. It would be in the form of an equity shares, which could be shared out with a outside investor. So in normal circumstances, what happens as far as partnership company, once it is into a partnership stage sort of thing, definitely the legal complications in respect of issuing of shares arises because there's no share capital or there is no element into that. So if a partnership company or a startup wants to raise, it has to raise it in the form of a debt fund. But once it moves into a private limited, definitely it can raise its authorized capital and then it could move it into an equity segment actually, as far as its equity share investment is concerned.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anything else, sir?
No,
Sir,
it's fine.
Sir, just I want to add one thing.
Yes,
but
sir.
there is a limitation for the members in the partnership that is 10, and as far as whereas in private limited company it will be 50. So
Yes,
that
sir.
is also the basic difference between partnership and private. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Yes,
This
ma'am.
equity shares, which you were telling, what happens to the investor when the company is on loss?
When the company is on loss, the equity shareholder doesn't get anything. He doesn't get anything in the form of a dividend or anything.
Then an investor generally doesn't keep quiet. No, he will be screwing the person. So how do this happen? I mean, I just want a clear picture of that.
See, what is the basic concept of an equity share? The basic concept of an equity share is high risk, high reward. Okay. Now, when an investor decides to invest into an equity share, definitely he is aware about it. The company would be profitable. It would be a loss-making company, or it would give me in the form of a dividend. It would not give me. It would grow. It would not grow. All these things are very much there at the back of the investor. Okay. So when he agrees to put in that amount of money, he is well aware about the risk which he is taking. And he is also rewarded if the company grows up to a very good or a very large level by getting a good valuation on its equity shares. So definitely an equity shareholder, before placing an investment, he is very much aware about what are the consequences in respect of his placing. Now, when we are talking about interference of an equity shareholder into the company is definitely there once an investor decides to put his own money, because that is an amount of interference. I would not say it is in the form of an interference. Now, if you see, there are so many examples of startup companies who are private limited companies who have gone into an equity shareholding, who have taken money from investors. And these investors, trust me, these investors who have invested into these startup companies, they are very helpful for these startup companies to achieve their own levels, to achieve their growth. Because who are investing into these startups in the form of an equity? These people who are investing in the form of an equity are venture capitalists. They are big corporates. They are angel investors who want a particular return as far as their money is concerned. They are absolutely able people who have done a good amount of business, who have a knowledge as far as the company is concerned. So interference is very much a part of an equity shareholder. But this interference, how the promoter takes it, that is also one of the basic necessities which a person has to look into. Interference is from an outsider or from an HNI who doesn't know anything. Definitely it is going to screw his happiness, as you rightly said. But one has to look into it, that the investment which he is going to have it from an investor has to be from the right investor, which also helps him for his company to grow up, which also assists him in moving up from one ladder to another ladder. So that is one of the most important things when we speak to an investor. That is why investment decision is one of the basic criteria, a very important thing the promoter has to think once he decides to have money for his company.
Will an investor who in the equity share, when there is a loss, can he try to buy off the startup company? Or can he have the right to say that, I mean, I'll buy off the rest of the shares and I'll take off your company?
See, as far as equity investment is concerned, just take an example that I'm an owner of a startup company. It's a private limited company. I own around 100 equity shares. And you are an investor. You come to me for investing. I give you only 20% holding. Now in this 20% holding, what are you going to buy as far as the company is concerned? 80% right is still there with me, ma'am. Now, if I go on incurring losses, the maximum thing is that what you can say to me is that as you're incurring losses, I can put in more money. I can put in more contribution as far as your company is concerned, so that we can buy the necessary equipments. We can start our own production. We can try to meet our losses. We can meet our operational expenses. So I come up saying, okay, fine, you put up around another 10% of the equity. So your equity holding comes to 30%, but still I have 70%. So the entire ownership will not go to a small investor unless the equity shareholding to him is offered at 51% or more. If you have a 51% or more equity, then the entire ownership or the control moves on to his hand and it moves on from me. Definitely this sort of an agreements do happen. But it is also necessary for a promoter to think about it, to put down into a legal format that these sort of a compulsory takeovers don't happen at the initial stage. Compulsory takeovers or mergers or acquisitions can definitely be invited and happening at a later stage, wherein the promoter gets a suitable value of shares, suitable value of his investments.
Okay. And what do you suggest for non-profitable startups?
For a non-profitable startups, which you mean in the form of an NGOs, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Okay. When I'm saying in the form of an NGOs or non-profitable, now what is the basic criteria? I would like to hear from you as far as what is the basic criteria on which NGO would survive actually?
No, like for example, we want to start an innovative center or an incubator center for the students and give them training and also try to help them in investing. So it won't be a profitable business, but it will be social
Yes.
helpfulness. In that case, what do you suggest to them?
Yes, you rightly said. All NGOs which are normally there, they are basically for a social impact responsibility. Their main idea is not profit making. Their main idea is helping students or helping people to come up to a certain level. And this could be funding, could be done in the form of a grants, in the form of small loans, which they are in a position to repay, in the form of a debt. And it couldn't be in the form of an equity because it's not a company, it's not a private limited organization. So you cannot issue shares out of it.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah.
So what kind of investors, investments do you, they should go in for?
purely in the form of a grant, purely in the form of a loans, which are in the form of a debt forms.
Okay, okay.
Because
That
equity
is,
doesn't play a part in it.
then debt form will incur interest, no, sir? When there's
Absolutely,
no
absolutely.
profit, how will you pay interest?
Absolutely. It is not that you're not making a profit. It's an NGO. It's an NGO. What do you mean by an NGO? It is no profit, no loss making company. So this is interest. It is a cash outflow, for which you have definitely to make a provision in your expenses, because it's a part of your expenses if you're taking in the form of a loan. It's a no profit or no loss making organization. It is no expense. It is not a criteria that no expense incurring organization.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, please continue. Please continue.
Yeah. Now we move on to a different sort of a investment pattern, which is called as an iSafe note. This iSafe is nothing but it stands for India Simple Agreement for Future Equity. It is purely a convertible instrument that an investor gets in return for making a cash investment in a startup. I would like to repeat this sentence again, that it is a convertible instrument which an investor gets in return for making a cash investment in a startup. Like an option or a warrant, an iSafe note, it allows the investor to buy shares in a future priced round. It allows an investor to buy shares at a future price round. It is automatically convertible into equity shares either on the occurrence of a specific liquidity event, such as a next pricing or a valuation or a dissolution or a merger or an acquisition, or at the end of the 3 years from the date of the issue, whichever is earlier. So what happens in this now actually? iSafe instrument, let me just come back to what is iSafe note actually. This iSafe note actually is not a concept which has been originated in India actually. This iSafe note is a concept which was originated in a European country and it has been adopted by India. There is a venture capital, currently a venture capital fund called 100X Venture Capital Fund. It's a new venture capital platform which is issuing these iSafe notes. And these iSafe notes are nothing but a convertible instrument which a normal investor would get in return for making a cash investment. Now, an investor decides to invest into a particular organization. What does it do? It invests into iSafe notes. It says that I want to invest into an iSafe note. An iSafe note means when he's investing into an iSafe note, he invests it in the form of a cash with an assurance that at a future date, this amount which is invested by him will be converted into equity. At an assurance that after a particular event, this entire amount would be converted in the form of an equity. What are the advantages of these iSafe notes? The advantages of these iSafe notes are, it helps a startup and the investor to avoid your long winding legal agreements, enables a quicker closure of deals. These are the two basic advantages of an iSafe note. They are also essentially compulsory convertible preference shares that will carry a very low dividend yield for legal purposes. So either it could be in the form of an equity or it could be in the form of a preference share, any form of a share which is converted after a particular event which is taking place. Definitely it is in the form of an iSafe note. Now this is a new form of an investment. In this, let me just tell you about one of the companies which I was talking about, which is 100X VC. It is a venture capitalist fund. Now, this venture capitalist fund plans to start around a 200 crore fund in the form of an iSafe investments, wherein their main motive would be to invest into startups or companies which agree to these iSafe notes. It's a Mumbai-based entity, and it will invest into startup having disruptive business models, higher growth, and scale across the range of sectors. They have put up a limit as far as investment is concerned. Their investment amount per startup would be to the extent of 25 lakhs to 1 crore amount, so that they could cover maximum number of investments in respect to that.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
Yes.
disturbance.
Tell me, sir.
Sir, for instance, I invested in a iSafe note in a particular startup. Okay.
Okay.
So, but nowadays, many startups are crashing down within a span of no time, right? So,
Yeah.
what will happen after the future date? Because within 1 year, the startup has crashed down. So, but my iSafe note duration is 3 years. After 3 years, the iSafe note will convert into equity. So that is
Yes.
the iSafe note. So what
Yeah.
will happen in that place? Thank you, sir. Please.
See, as far as what you said, actually, most of the startup companies, they do start up and they end up miserably as far as functioning is concerned. Now, in case if you are planning to invest into a startup through an iSafe note, actually, it's a sort of a risk factor which you are taking in the form of conversion. Now, this risk factor which you're taking in the form of a conversion as far as equity or a preference share is concerned, this conversion is going to happen only at a future date on the completion of an event, like the next round of funding, on a price discovery mechanism, or at any stage, basically. And when you are, as an investor, investing into iSafe note, you are amplifying yourself in taking up that risk factor into account. And in most cases, what happens, investment in iSafe notes are normally done for startups which have a disruptive business model, which have a higher growth, which have a scalability across various sectors, which also have other peer groups into that same sector who have achieved that particular stage, who have achieved that particular standards or levels, sort of thing. And only in those circumstances a person desires to invest into an iSafe note.
Okay,
So
sir. Carry on.
Any other thing, sir? Hello?
No, I think you can go to the next slide. Or if it is still is there, you can continue.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask you one thing.
Right.
The person who questioned me in respect to the iSafe note, actually. What made you think that you should invest into an iSafe note?
So actually, to encourage the startup, that is the one thing. And
Okay.
I have an intention, or I have a intention that this prospective, the prospects of the particular startup will be very positive in a near future. So that may be my intention.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect. What you said is
with that
absolutely
intention,
correct. What you said is absolutely correct, sir.
Thank you.
That means what? You believe on the startup. You believe on his intentions.
Yes.
You believe on his strategy. You believe on his own vision, and you know about it that this startup is definitely going to grow up in future. And that is one of the things that you are ready to take a risk as far as investing into iSafe notes. So that gives an answer to your question as to why a person should invest into an iSafe note. And even if there are failures as far as startup is concerned, why a person should invest into an iSafe note. I hope I'm clear in that.
Yes, yes, perfectly.
Okay, sure. So we can move on to the next slide as far as redeemable preference shares are concerned. These are redeemable preference shares. Basically, these are also called as preferred stock. Redeemable preference shares are also called as preferred stock. It is one of the most effective ways of financing big companies. These shares come with a blend of equity as well as debt financing. They are regularly traded on stock exchanges. Redeemable preference shares are traded on the stock exchanges. Redeemable preference shares are repurchased at a fixed price, at a fixed rate, on a fixed date, or by announcing it in the form of an investment or whatever it is. What are the pros and the cons in respect of redeemable preference shares? The pros or the advantages is dividend is payable only in the event that there are sufficient profits. Again, a basic characteristic of a preference share, which is the dividend has to be paid only if there are profits. There is no equity dilution in respect of that. And the cons are, if there is sufficient funds, dividend will be mandatory paid to the preference shareholder. It is again not suited for an early stage startup. Also, one of the basic characteristics of it is that it comes in handy for cushioning the impact of inflation and the declining of the monetary rate. Why I would say that it is an advantage as far as it comes in handy for cushioning the impact of inflation, because redeemable preference shares are a blend of equity as well as a debt segment. So if I need a money to right now, and if I need funds, I can definitely go in for a redeemable preference share, and if the investor agrees for redeeming it at a preference at a particular fixed date. So it's a ready cushioning or a ready cash which is available to me at the time when I need the most. And these essentially debt instruments add cushion for the business, as it's rightly said in the last pointer, which has been mentioned actually. We move on to the next, participating preference shares. Participating preference shares are basically a hybrid form of an instrument of equity shares and preference shares. They incorporate a fixed dividend along with additional share in profits if the company achieves certain parameters in respect of that. These shares also extend the right to partake in the surplus profit during liquidation once the company in question has paid its shareholders. What do I mean by saying this? It allows the right to partake in surplus profit during liquidation. When I mean to say that, as a shareholder, if you're an equity shareholder, if your company goes into a liquidation, if there is an amount or if there is a fund or if there is a balance after the liquidation, then an equity shareholder gets. Whereas in terms of a participating preference share, it allows you to partake a contribution into the surplus profits. So it extends the right to partake in surplus profit. So to elaborate this, the participating preference shareholder receives a fixed rate of dividend, also a share in the company's extra earnings. Now, in this case, what happens? Most individuals invest into participating preference shares of those companies which are likely to grow or which have a generate robust profits, which they feel that definitely it's going to grow, which is going to grow into leaps and bounds, which is going to have a definite amount of profit. They do normally go into participating preference shares. In this, what happens? Agreement is happening in respect of a preference shareholder, which normally has these features that once the company generates profit, a certain share of profits along with a prefixed dividend is paid to the participating preference shareholder. In terms of the company winding up, the shareholders receive an extra amount over and above whatever they receive in the form of prefixed dividend. So these are the advantages in respect of a participating preference shares. The cons, again, entity will have to give out additional profits or additional dividends in terms of higher profits. Also, prefixed profits plus a higher share in its profits. These are the cons which are normally there, actually, in respect of a participating preference shares. We move on to convertible debentures, actually. Convertible debentures, or debentures rather, is nothing but a form of a debt segment. Debentures is nothing but a form of a loan. What is a debenture? Debenture is nothing but a loan, which is basically to be repaid to the debenture holder or to the debenture investor at a particular fixed time. Now, what is this convertible? When we hear the term of convertible into any of these securities, we have to keep ourselves in mind. These convertibles are purely a blend of equity as well as a debt segment. That is, there is debt, there is an equity. There's an option to convert it into equity shares at a future set date. Now, these convertible shares could be a fully convertible debentures or a partly convertible debentures in the form of a debt security. So convertible debentures could also be one of the forms, compulsory convertible debentures. So there are three forms into this. One is a fully convertible debenture, one is a partly convertible debenture, one is a compulsory convertible debentures format. Again, the advantages of it is that till it is in the debenture status, dividend is payable. In the event that there are sufficient profits, there are no equity dilution. So the ownership remains, or the ownership control remains with the promoter himself. Once the company is converted into a debenture, then definitely the ownership passes on to the debenture holder, who is now an equity shareholder. So these are the cons as far as the convertible debentures is concerned. These are again not suitable for early stage startups, convertible debentures. These are essentially a debt instruments which have an option to convert it into an equity share at a future set date. This set date could be in terms of the number of years. This set date could be in terms of a particular event happening. This set date could be in terms of any terms which are specified into an agreement between a debenture share holder as well as a promoter, actually. So these are convertible debentures. Now we are talking about ESOPs. ESOPs are nothing but employee stock options. Employee stock options are, let me start with a different venture in respect of this ESOPs, how it is worked out actually. I would give you a slight background about ESOPs. What is ESOPs actually? ESOP is nothing but an equity share or an option for an employee to have an equity share, to have a ownership into the company. ESOP is one of the wonderful tools of a startup to retain its own employees. This is one of the basic and the wonderful tool wherein a startup could retain its employee. Now, employee stock ownership is nothing but an employee benefit plan which gives the workers an ownership interest in the company. I have a startup of my own. In case if I have a startup of my own, I have a private limited company. I have a team of people working with me. I know about their eligibility, their capability, their zeal, their attitude towards my company, their motives towards me, as well as their basic intentions of taking my company from one level to another level. I don't want this entire team to dismantle or to move from one company to another company. So this is an essential and an effective tool wherein I enter into an agreement with each and every employee at the time of undertaking them, at the time of employing them, that after a particular period, once my company achieves this sort of a pattern, I would definitely issue you equity shares, wherein you get those equity shares at a particular vesting amount, which has to be paid by the employee at a particular date, at a particular event of a conversion of an equity. They act as a strong motivator for retaining the talent in the company. As employees absolutely feel motivated, they feel motivated because they are part owners of the company. Moreover, in the short run, also one should also look into it. There is no cash outflow. It is an indirect way of funding in a startup, because once the employee agrees to put in that amount in respect of an employee stock options, it is in the form of an option, and then later on convert it in the form of an equity. The main benefit for the employees is the ability to share the company's success. So ESOPs is one of the basic tools in the hands of promoters of a startup company, not at seed stage or not at pre-seed stage, but definitely in the form once it reaches a Series A, Series B, or Series C stage, once it moves into a higher level stage, to issue ESOPs for retaining that particular employee. So this is very important criteria in the form of actually any startup company. This ESOP is absolutely regulated. There are numerous restrictions in respect of giving up these ESOPs, valuing these ESOPs, regulating the ESOPs, conversion of these ESOPs into equity shares, and these all apply to each and every employee once he selects for the stock purchase plan. Any things or any questions in respect of this from participants as far as ESOPs are concerned?
Sir, if the employee falls sick or anything happens to the employee, what happens to his shares?
These options, these shares, because these are options actually. If an employee is sick or employee wants to leave this company, okay, then these shares are bought in. What happens actually, once it's a private limited company, I'll just give you a small narration in respect of that. A private limited company decides to have a ESOP. ESOPs are nothing but employee stock options, which it has to give to its own employees. It has 100 rupees in the form of an equity share. It decides that out of 108 rupees, it is going to give to those employees which are working with him in the form of equity. Now for that, what he does, he forms a trust. These shares are with the trust. If an employee leaves it, it hands over back the equity shares to the trust. The trust purchases these shares and it gives it to another employee who is likely to join the company at a respective amount or at a respective price which is being decided.
Okay.
So it is a form of a trust.
So that the shares of the employee cannot be shared with his own family. It can be shared. It will be given to another employee only.
Yes, ma'am. It cannot be shared within his own employee, within his own family. It cannot be shared within his family. It has to be given to the employee. It has to be given back to the trust. The trust buys that, and whatever shares are there with the trust again reissues it. Because one thing you have to keep it into mind, key ESOPs are given for retaining the talent. ESOPs are given to employees for retaining the talent. An employee who plans to move out, picking back that shares what has been given to him and giving to a new outsider or a new person who is joining your company for retaining that employee is absolute a prerequisite of any company to move into his own criteria or to move as far as progress of the company is concerned, because the progress of each company depends on its own employees, and retaining talent is one of the most important prerequisites.
Okay,
as far as
one more doubt, sir. If in case the person is sick or he is leaving the company, so far whatever he had had it as share, equity share, won't it be liquidated and given it to him?
No, it will not be liquidated and given it to him, because he has the option. There is a vesting column in that. Under every ESOP, there is a vesting amount. That is, at this particular date, this option turns into an equity share. At a particular date, this option is converted into an equity share. So till the time this option is there with him, it is in the form, suppose if he contributes 100 rupees in the form of an option before getting converted, and if he leaves, the trust will pay him that amount in respect of that.
I didn't catch that point, sir.
See, if he has an equity share option, actually, ESOP is what? It's an option. It's an option for conversion into an equity share at a particular date or at a particular event. Okay. If I today buy ESOPs, if the company issues me an ESOPs, what does the agreement say? That at a particular time period or at a particular amount, this entire amount is going to be converted into equity at that particular point of time at the valuation, whatever is pre-decided. So till that time, it's an option. So if the option, he has to surrender the option and take back his money, and this option is later on passed on to the some person.
Okay. So anything mishappenings before that, he is not benefited.
No, it is not.
Okay.
Because the main purpose itself is defeated, sir. Because the main purpose of it is defeated. Retaining a talent is the main purpose of an ESOP.
Okay, sir.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. If employees will go out, then what happens, sir? For example, they hold some stock, and if they go out after some few months or few years, then, sir?
Now, in this case, what happens? Now, a startup company is there. Sir. You have issued ESOPs. Yes, the options have been converted into equity shares. Sir. Now, he is an equity shareholder. He is the owner of your company. He's a part owner of your company to the extent of the equity shareholding he has. He moves out. Okay.
Okay.
Still, he'll retain his ownership.
Sir.
Unless the company and the promoters decide to buy back his equity. Because how an employee is going to get back his funds?
Yes, sir.
Just think about it. An employee is going to get back his funds only if the company buybacks its equity, or else if these equities are listed on the stock exchange.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So once an employee moves out of the organization, or if he leaves the company, then his money he'll get back if it is converted into shares only if the company decides to buy back,
Okay.
or if it is listed on the stock exchange.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
I
Yes,
think
yes.
ESOPs is a very good option during time where you don't have, working capital and you want to avoid a cash outflow.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir.
Yes, this gives a cushion, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Rightly said. But one has to not forget about one motive of ESOPs as far as retaining talent is concerned.
That is primary. Yes.
That is a primary virtue in respect of that. Because tomorrow, as a startup, as a promoter, I might think that, okay, this is a good cushion for me in respect of having funds. I don't have to have a cash flow. I get a ready-made amount of money to meet my operational expenses. That should not be the criteria of any startup, actually.
Yes, definitely.
Sir, it means the employer, like, the team will have an option to choose the people to whom only this option will be given, or will they give it to anybody, sir?
No. It normally happens only to the lead top management people, actually, and the first level and the second level of management people.
It means it is a discretion of the top management.
Yeah, it is a discretion of the promoter and the top management. What happens actually, who are the decision makers? The decision makers are the first team level after the promoters are concerned.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And the second team level. The first and the second team level are the actual runners of the company.
Yes, sir.
So they are to be retained. It is not that the persons who are at the ground root or the grassroots levels are not to be retained. They also have to be retained. But then definitely these are two of the most important things. Now, in many companies, what also happens that if I as a promoter decide to give ESOPs, what I'll do, I decide around 10% of my shares are to be given in the form of ESOPs to all the employees. Now, what I say that, okay, fine. Out of 10%, 5% I gave to level 1, level 2, and level 3. 2% I give to level 4 people. 1% I give to level 5 people. Again, 1% I give to level 6 people. So what happens? I give to everyone in the company, but at different levels, at different stages, different amount of percentages to each and every people based on their capability, capacity of leading the company, of having me as a talent runner.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, there are different types. The next slide is absolutely good slide sort of thing, which says there are different types of investors, actually. We are talking about startups. So let us concentrate only of these investors who are purely investing into startups. One of them is absolutely the first one, incubation center, which you are very much aware about it. What's an incubation center? A good definition about incubation center is it's absolutely a space for a new age entrepreneur and young minds to transform innovative ideas into viable business propositions. So an incubation center is always the first step for a startup to get enrolled himself. It's a form of an investor who invests his money in the form of 7% or 8% or whatever percentage he wants to invest into a startup. So it is the first investor which a startup tastes, actually. A startup incubation center, why does it invest? Because it provides support functions, mentorship, resources, individual entrepreneurs. It attaches himself to these startups. These startups, the incubation centers want these startups to grow up. They want these startups to achieve a particular sort of a level. They want these startups to move up in life. And that is one of the form of investors. And this is the first, as I rightly said, the first investor which every startup tastes normally once it gets registered with itself. Incubation centers have been set up across all India for effective development of startup ecosystem. As earlier said, they provide support services like mentorship services, facilities, funding to early stage startups. They mostly cater to startups with ideation or MVP or at a pre-production stage. You all would be quite conversant with this incubation center. So let us not spend much time on this incubation center because all of us know about it. What is an incubation center, how it is funded, and how this sort of a private fund, whether it's a privately run fund or whether it's a government run incubation center. We move on to a next set of investors, which is also called an angel investor. Angel investors, normally, these are the second type of investors who provide seed funding to startups. at an ideation stage or an MVP stage. These are wealthy individuals who are prepared to invest their money in the hope of receiving a return. These investment amounts run from $10,000 to a few million of rupees. These funds in which the investor invests, these funds, I'm sorry, these startups wherein an angel investor invests, they are into an extremely risky phase of its life cycle. They are into a seed stage or a pre-stage funding. And definitely the returns which an angel investor expects, it is also on a very high level. These angel investors are normally wealthy individuals or wealthy HNIs who normally want to invest their money in terms of a higher return, higher than the normal interest rates which they would normally get if they are investing into a loan, or if they are investing into a debenture, or if they are investing into an equity share. What is the characteristic of the angel investors? The characteristics of an angel investor is that they don't want any involvement in the day-to-day operation of the business. Their main intention is just a higher return. For some business owners, this is a positive thing because the angel investor will not invest or will not interfere into its day-to-day investments. However, it could be also advantageous to have an investor that is switched on and wants to contribute. Because angel investors, also one more thing we have to keep it in mind, because angel investors are a set of investors who are individuals, who are HNIs, who are corporates. Now, when I'm talking about HNIs, when I'm talking about corporates, they do have a large network. So they come along with a large network of people. So having these HNIs or having these corporates who are ready to assist and start up from a seed stage to a level stage, and a little bit of interference from these angel investors always happens to be a little bit productive for the startup also, as far as extending his own network is concerned, as extending his own parameters is concerned, knowing about the different peer groups are concerned, knowing about the different competitors in his own business is concerned. So they are helpful to a certain extent. They are also to a certain extent as far as interfering concerns are concerned. The next sort of investors are venture capitalists and private equity holders or private equity investors. These two are basically one and the same. A venture capitalist is a person who is basically funding into a pre-profitability phase of a startup cycle. It's a person or a company who invests into a business venture, providing capital for startup or expansion. The startups that venture capitals normally invest in already have proven their product. Hence, the level of risk involved is not as high as an angel investor. A venture capitalist comes after. This is normally called as a fourth stage of financing. The first stage, as we said, it's pre-seed, seed funding, angel investor, and venture capital investor or a private equity investor. Venture capitalist and private equity investor is more or less the same. It is either treated as a fourth stage investor, or it is also treated as a fifth stage investor in case if the startup also takes in a mezzanine capital funding. These investors, venture capital investors or private equity investors, are absolutely equity-based investors. They are in return for a venture capital or a private equity funding, which is typically parting with your shares as far as the startup is concerned. The deciding factors of investing is the founder's profile, the growth rates, the production margins, the capacity of the product to conquer the business, the competitors who have already achieved as far as this product is concerned, the novel idea with which the startup comes. The key characteristics of funding type is that it comes with a high level of involvement from your new business partner. A high level of involvement, when I say, is the venture capitalist and a private share equity holder. The third and the fourth slide, which we are talking about, is basically an investor who takes part in the day-to-day affairs also of the company, who wants to know about the insides of the company, who wants to be a part of the decision-making company, who wants to be a part of the decision-making process of the company. because he holds a particular amount of equity in the shares. He knows that the company is going to go into a particular phase. He also would love to have a board membership in respect of it. So normally venture capitalists and private equity holders are applicable to private limited startup companies who have a particular amount of share capital, who are in a position to shelve out a particular amount of equity holding to these venture capitalists and to these private equity holders. There is a sort of an agreement between venture capitalists and private equity holders wherein exit terms are decided. These exit terms could be either the buyback by the promoter once it grows up into a particular stage, or listing of these companies into an equity with a stock exchange, or coming up with an IPO. Most of these companies who are investing into startups in the form of venture capitalists and private equity holders normally have an investment level to the extent of 5 to 6 years of their investments, after which they would definitely go in for a buyback by the promoters or listing it in the form of an equity. So this is one of the major forms which is normally being catered by various startup companies who are into the 4th stage or the 5th stage, wherein their product is stabilized, wherein they need finance for further expansion, wherein they need finance for further growth. Their production margins are to be increased, their production levels are to be increased, they have to move into a good expansive market, they have to move abroad in respect of their exports are concerned. So all these factors are very much essential if they decide to go in for a venture capitalist. So venture capitalists take all these things also into account before investing it into these companies. What a venture capitalist would do prior to investing into these companies, the venture capitalist would study the company. They would study the product of the company. They would study the growth rate of the company. They would study how the product is acceptable in the market. They would study what sort of a competitiveness this product has. They would also study whether this product which is going to come, whether it's going to have a sustainability in the market. They see the future of the company, how it's going to grow, whether any more new products are going to be lined up, whether any more investments are going to come in the form of an investor. All these things are very much taken into account before investing into a company by a venture capitalist or a private equity funders. Any questions on this, sir?
No, it's fine. We can go ahead.
Okay. So we have covered actually slide third and fourth, because slide third and fourth are more or less the same, which are venture capitalists and private equity holders. The next slide is purely in the form of numbers, which are given for startup funding activity. The key numbers which are there, which have been depicted in the form of a graph. All of us are aware about it. Let me just come to one point, that why are we not giving a comparison of 18, 19 and 20? All of us are aware that due to this COVID pandemic, which has basically ruined the entire global structure, actually, it has brought in the economy down. We are not in a position to have a direct comparison of the number of deals which are happening in 19, the number of deals which are happening in 20, the amount of funds which are happening in 19, the amount of funds which have been happening in the year 20. So as a basic data that how many number of startup funding activity is done, we have just given the half yearly or H1 2020 figures without comparing it with 19 or without comparing it with 18. Because comparison with 18, comparison with 19, comparison with of 20 with 18 and 19 would be a futile exercise. Because all of us are aware about it, that in the past 6 months, we are hardly in a position to have any of our companies run into a full activity, any of the fundings which are happening. So this is absolutely an essential thing which we have to look into it. And the figures which say are purely limited only to 2020 right now. If we see as far as 2020 is concerned, the startup funding activity, there were totally 30 deals which happened in the H1 2020. In the debt segment, you have 616, 30 deals. In the equity segment, you have 392 deals with an average volume of $4,162 million, which has happened in respect of H1 2020. This says about the amount of deals which have happened in debt as well as equity. Now, let us concentrate on the amounts raised in US million dollars, actually, in the month of Jan, Feb, March, April, May, and June. If you see in the month of Jan, Feb, March, definitely we were in a position to raise a good amount of equity funding, which amounted to around 912 million US dollars. In January, $852 million. In the month of February, in the month of March, $1,226 million. And then after April, the rest is history. Everyone is aware about it. Hardly there were any fundings which were happening, hardly any number of deals which were happening in respect of it. The number of deals in the month of April, though it rose to 75, and in comparison to January to the 78, the amount of funding which happened was only to the extent of $660 million in comparison to $912 million. In the month of May and June, it has further drastically reduced in terms of the contribution, in terms of number of deals also. The reason everyone is aware about it, why it is happening in respect of it. The next slide is again equity funding by quarter, the quarter one and quarter two. Again, the same slide repeats as we had earlier. The quarter one shows a good amount of deals and good amount of funding which is done in the form of an equity. And the quarter two shows a lesser amount of equity funding in the form of equity which has happened. One more thing which I would like to share among you people over here is, are you aware about what is a unicorn actually? When I'm talking to you about funding. Now, as far as India is concerned, a unicorn company is nothing but a startup company which has been founded after 2003 and has a current valuation of more than $1 billion. In India, you can find unicorn companies. Examples of unicorn companies are Paytms, Byju's, Oyo Rooms. You have Ola Cabs, you have Swiggy, you have Big Baskets. You have all these in the form of unicorn companies. The initial quarter, that is the first 3 months of quarter, saw around 3 companies having come into this unicorn segment by raising more than $1 billion in respect of your Big Basket, in respect of your Ola Cabs, and in respect of your Oyo Rooms. But the second quarter definitely saw a lesser amount. Hardly there are any unicorns right now as far as Indian companies are concerned. Just to give you a background about what sort of a funding happened as far as the first quarter is concerned and what sort of a segment as far as the second was concerned. If I compare the next slide as far as debt segment is concerned, again the same history repeats. The debt funding as far as quarter segment first is concerned, it is 515 in comparison to $100 million in the second segment. The next slide is early stage funding, growth stage, and late stage funding. Now, this gives you an idea about early stage funding were to the extent of 279 deals which happened in the early stage funding in H1 2020, wherein an amount of $519.40 million were raised. Under the growth stage, you had 72, wherein $1072 million were raised. Under the late stage, you have 41 deals happening, wherein 2570.10 happened. When I mean to say this classification of early stage, growth stage, and late stage, I mean to say early stages, pre-seed, seed funding. These are the early stage fundings. Then you have the growth stage, where you have the mezzanine funding. You have a slight amount of venture capitalist, and you also have a private equity. And the late stage comes to you in the form of a Series A, Series B, Series 3 funding, wherein the company has already stabilized itself. These are the stage-wise funding activities which happened in H1 2020. This second last slide is absolutely the sector-wise information, which is very much there as far as amounts raised in US dollars is concerned. Again, here we could see that the fintech and the financial services sector could raise an amount of more than 780 million US dollars. Moving on to the second sector, which is an education sector, you have healthcare and health tech sector as the third sector, e-commerce sector, SaaS sector, logistics, media, agri-tech, and the last one is an accommodation, which is again an 807 sectors. So this is a normal trending, which is normally found as far as Indian activity or a stage-wise funding activity in various sectors are concerned. The next slide is the stage-wise funding. Here we are normally comparing it with 2001-9, because as we have seen earlier, the first stage, that is the initial first quarter, was quite a good quarter as far as we Indian companies are concerned. So we are comparing it with 2019, wherein the number of deals in comparison to 19 were up by 5.7%. The amount raised was again a little bit down by 26.4% in comparison to 19. The number of growth stage deals happened 4.3%. The amount raised was lesser. The number of deals happened in the third or the late stage was 12.8. And the amount in the late stage ideation stage, again, it lowered. From this sort of a slide, one could get a trend of 19 and 20 years. Though the number of deals in the initial first half increased, the amount contributed was lesser in comparison to 19. Again, the major factor is the economic slowdown and the entire world getting into the grip of absolutely COVID, having an understanding about what future it's going to be like, how it's going to slow down, how the entire industry is going to slow down, how the economy is going to slow down, the rise in the inflation. All these factors are the major contributors in respect of the stage-wise funding as far as H1 2020 is concerned. By this, we end up the slides, and I'm extremely thankful to you for listening patiently to all my presentation. And in case of any questions, I am absolutely ready to take these questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Vikas. I was just doing back of the hand calculation about what is the average investment of early stage startups, because most of the faculty here, when they're setting up the new innovation centers, the first is what they're going to have is a seed stage. Then they'll get into early stage or angel stage. So based on your slide, I could get a sense that 1.39 crore is the average investment per startup.
Perfect. Perfect.
So it's not a bad amount. In fact, which bank gives you 1.39 crore without collateral for some crazy God-forsaken idea?
Absolutely.
By startup means that you are doing something crazy, right? Like but somebody is investing 1.39, 1.4 crore just by closing eyes. Then it makes sense that they expect good returns.
That's true.
Because you said they normally early stage investors would expect 100x returns in down the line, like 4 to 5 years. That's fair enough, I feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But one more thing also, what you said was rightly correct in your aspect and the perspective actually. But if we were not having this sort of a situation, definitely we would have grown up actually to a much larger level than currently whatever we are.
I would say I would see in a different way. This has given us a level to introspect, because this has given 3 laws amendments last few days.
Yes.
I don't think government would have done if not for COVID. And definitely they have the direct and indirect impact on agri startups. Fintech startups. And now, fact is, we see at the end of the day, if a tech-based startup, suppose a manufacturing startup is coming, how long will be a startup? After 7th or 8th year, he has to get into manufacturing. When you have so much of a cobweb of laws and bylaws are there, then I don't think anybody will be encouraged to shift from startup to a small scale industry or a medium sized industry. They would
But,
stop there, and either they exit or they no, or nothing much happens, because at the end of the day, startup has to convert into a public enterprise, or it's a big entity, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Rightly said, rightly said. So definitely you have a positive hope, sort of a thing, a ray of hope from whatever has happened actually. And absolutely the government schemes which are being coming up, probably tomorrow I would say something about one of the slides of government schemes. You also would be well aware about it. There are around 125 schemes which are coming up, which have been started up by the various ministries and various departments for boosting up the startups and boosting up these funding activities for all these startups.
No, another reason I would find lack of initial investment is many of this investment are happening at incubation center level.
Yeah.
When the government gives seed grant through Nidhi Prayas or BIRAC or something, then the investors are investing. That is giving some kind of confidence. Okay, government grant has come, so I can invest. So many of the investment that is happening at incubation center have been started because incubation centers as such could not give money.
Absolutely.
Because we would see, upside growth for at least health tech, right? But in your graph, it's not showing that.
Absolutely. We see the upside growth for health tech, whatever we are seeing actually, this may not come right now at this point of time. This might definitely be a positive thing as far as the future is concerned, because everyone is concerned about their health tech actually. Health is one of the major priorities. So definitely health tech industries would definitely get a boost up at the later stage of maybe at the end of this year or maybe in the next year or a future date actually.
Maybe, as you said, yes, it would reflect in the coming years.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Dear participants, please ask the questions, because this is going to set a stage for you also when you're writing proposals to government about incubation centers. You need to write how the investment landscape is happening you need to have that overall understanding. So you can clarify doubts, sir is here. Or you can put questions in the chat box in case you want to ask typing.
Sir,
yes, sir.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
What's the future, sir? Because so far, many startups are failed because of China competition. Because China, they're giving throwaway prices. Now I think there is a stringent action on them. Because of that China, many startups of Indian startups are failed.
Okay.
Even I am also one person. We started one Intel Bin solution. We got a fund from 10 lakhs from Nidhi. And we already get some components from China. Now some components are, am I right, shipment problem. And another one, if you want to start what you can call building the components here, there is a huge gap. Now I think if China will stop, definitely there's a good future. This is my intention. I want your, because you are all from industry persons. I'm a professor.
Mr. Shiva, you would like to comment on this?
I can add, and I'm sure you have something else also in mind.
Yeah.
See, as far as China is concerned, it is since it is a authoritarian and kind of dictator kind of thing. You do not know what is the policy within their country. Because I heard somewhere Professor Vaidyanathan, who is father of IRMA, he was saying in China, government decides the price, not the people. We don't even know. I mean, they are exploiting the human resource like anything. You cannot do that in this country, so you can never compare China and Indian products. That is one point I can say. But in global, after LPG in 1991, only customer can make a decision what he has to buy. He does not decide whether it is made in India or not, whichever comes for cheap. So at the government level, there are certain reforms they have to do it. That is government, which we cannot do anything. But second thing is technological disruptive innovations. If we can bring, which have strong IP, then you cannot beat China. China cannot. Nobody can beat us, because 95% of startups do not have strong IP, I would say.
I agree to what Dr. Shiva has to say about it actually. As far as our future is concerned, definitely we are looking at a very bright future as far as India is concerned. The reason why we are looking at a bright future as far as India is concerned is because most of the other countries, if you go through the recent news, whichever has happened, investors are absolutely moving out their companies from China and planning to relocate either in India or in any other Northeast sectors. So not only relocating their companies, but also investments in startups will definitely pick up with absolutely a backing and a proper sort of an alignment from the government in respect of it. So definitely it is not only just that an individual startup will have to take an initiative, but it will be the entire government, entire organizations will have to take up an initiative in respect of moving up. And definitely we would grow up much more than China in this current scenario.
There are two things which can beat, which we can beat, China with. One is in agriculture.
Yes.
India is one of the best agricultural technologists in the world. We have 2,000 plus agriculture institute. Take wheat, we have a dedicated wheat center. Take sorghum, we have dedicated sorghum. Take goat, sheep, dam, any plant, animal, we have dedicated research centers. Usually we have 20 to 30 patents, amazing patents. Now, unless you go through the patent landscape in the country, you don't know how China can do any reverse engineering. But in agriculture, you cannot do reverse engineering. Yes. That is nature. That is where you can beat China. One thing. Second thing is strong IP. Okay, as
yes.
I'm emphasizing, if you have strong IP, means IP asset, patent, you cannot beat them. They cannot beat us. And third thing is, you should have wonderful business model. I would recall one model just for paucity of time. I'll take only one. Rivigo. Rivigo is a world's first logistics disruptive platform. Nobody could do in the world. Within 3 years, they could get like what 300x growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh. And I totally support Dr. Shiva in respect of that for a startup to grow, whether it fails or it doesn't fail, that is a different question. But at the initial stage, if he has a foolproof business plan, if he has a proper product, if he manages his costs effectively, if he is in a position to have a good cash flow in respect of management of cash flow, a good team, a dedicated team with vision, a perfect vision, then definitely I don't think startups would fail in any aspect in respect of that.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else want to add a point or ask question?
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Yeah, please, sir.
Sir, very good afternoon to Vikas sir and Shivakumar sir, Shivakiran sir. Sir, actually, I do not know whether this question is relevant or not to the startup, but still I have one question for quite long. This question is there with me. Sir, actually, what, when we observe a few items, sometimes, on the item cost maybe around 400 rupees or sometimes even 1,000 rupees. Just simply they will print like 1,000 rupees, but they will sell like 200 rupees or 250 rupees. Number one. Now, why government is not in a position to take a decision that if MRP is the correct rate, so that there will not be a chance to exploit the customers. See, for example, crackers are there. They will simply print on that item 1,000 rupees, but they will give like a 70% discount, 80% discount, 90% discount. Ultimately, we do not know what is the right price of that particular item. In fact, I think I have this question, sir. What made the government not to fix the MRP? Because anyhow, tax will be always on the selling price or always on the MRP price. If MRP price is there, let them not to give the discount, and whatever the price that will be, with that price it will be sold out, then will be considered. Sir, please.
Let me just be a little bit narrative in respect of what you have asked a question about it. Let us take an example of going and buying a product from outside. Okay. If I go out, I buy a product. That was a normal tendency which always happened as far as the customer were concerned in the early stages. If I go out to buy a product, the price is $200 plus GST on it, which is around 18%. I tell the shopkeeper that you don't charge me GST, you just charge me $200 and you don't give me the bill. So this is absolutely a bargaining element. So that is why absolutely, as far as MRPs are concerned, that cannot, it couldn't be regulated by the government actually. Because we as an individuals, we don't want to pay that amount of tax which we have supposed to pay. We want to have those prices or those products at a lower rate. And that is one of the things which are actually boosting up these shopkeepers and these people to sell it at a lower price. Also, there is another amount of bargainability. Also, there is another amount in respect to the procurement cost. Each and every product cannot have the same cost. Each and every product cannot have the same price. Why it cannot have the same price? Because it depends on the quality. It depends on the specifications of the product. It depends on from where the product has been procured. It depends on the cost. It depends on the brand. It depends on the marketing value. All these values also take into effect. So fixing up a fixed MRP to any of those things and then not having a bargaining element to that is not going to serve the purpose. That's what my personal, this is.
Yes, it is very sure that there may not be a fixed price for any product. As you said very right that there may be different qualities of products. Each product with a different quality will have a different price. But question that the same price which of respective quality may be printed of that respective price only. Maybe company may be different. They may fix their own price. But at the same time, as you said very right that government itself, in fact, is giving a chance to the customers. Don't pay the tax. You can even have a chance even to utilize the facility. In fact,
that's
am I
true.
right, sir?
That's true. That's very much true. So we as individuals, we have to decide on our own what is right and what is wrong at every point of time in life.
But laymen are being exploited. So, see, for example, every time I have been assumption anything that when we go to cracker shop, they will print 1,000 rupees. They will say that we are giving 70% discount, 80% discount, sometimes 90% discount. How it is possible? It's straight away in a very open market. People are being exploited. I do not know what sort of governments which they are having control on this.
And one more thing, what you spoke about it is absolutely a positive thing, that you come up paying a price of $200 on an MRP of 1,000 and you come up starting saying that, okay, fine, I have paid just 200 and your neighbor says that he has paid just 150 and you come down crashing actually.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Maybe we should take up that one as one series of discussion. Maybe
because that will involve a lot of complications in that actually.
Yes, it's true.
Sure. Right, sir. So if anything else, anybody has anything to ask? Because we'll close. It's almost 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, sir. Thank you. Team Arthayan. I should thank even your associate for collaborating and doing the networking with Chandramouli to make this event happen. And your experience is really vast, and you have shared your learnings here, sir. Thank you very much for your time and sharing your experiences and answering our participants' queries very effectively. So we'll stay in touch. Have a good day, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Arthayan, and me personally also do thank all of you, all the participants who are there in this entrepreneurship development program. May you take something from here and definitely work out into your own zeal. All of you are definitely contributing to the society to a very large extent. All the best for all of you. And thanks a lot for